In a unanimous 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court has redrawn the boundaries of presidential authority, striking down the executive branch's use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs. This landmark ruling is more than a technical policy shift, it's a resounding statement on the separation of powers at the heart of American democracy. The court's verdict arrives amid deep political division, yet the unity of the justices gives it extraordinary weight. We'll explore how this case unfolded, the legal arguments that shaped it, and what this decision means for the future of American governance. The court has spoken with one voice. Now the nation must grapple with the consequences. The roots of this Supreme Court case trace back to the Trump administration's aggressive use of emergency powers to reshape international trade. In the late 2010s, as global tensions rose and economic competition intensified, the administration sought new ways to protect American industries and assert its influence on the world stage. This approach marked a significant shift in how the executive branch wielded its authority over trade policy, setting the stage for a legal and political showdown. Invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, the White House imposed broad tariffs on imports, citing national security. The administration argued that certain foreign goods threatened the stability of key American industries, and that swift action was necessary to safeguard the nation's economic interests. These tariffs affected a wide range of products, from steel and aluminum to everyday consumer goods, impacting both international partners and domestic businesses. Businesses across America pushed back, arguing these tariffs were crippling and amounted to taxes, powers reserved for Congress. Small manufacturers, retailers, and farmers all felt the pinch as costs rose and supply chains were disrupted. Many feared that the tariffs would lead to job losses, higher prices for consumers, and long-term damage to the American economy. Lawsuits quickly followed, with industry groups claiming the president had overstepped constitutional boundaries. They argued that only Congress has the authority to levy taxes and regulate trade, and that the executive branch's actions threatened the balance of power established by the Constitution. The legal battle drew national attention as both sides prepared to defend their interpretation of the law. The administration countered that regulating commerce in emergencies was within its rights. Officials insisted that the president must have the flexibility to respond quickly to threats, especially in a rapidly changing global economy. They maintained that the IEEPA granted the necessary authority to act decisively when national security was at stake. Conflicting lower court rulings set the stage for the Supreme Court to decide: can a president use emergency powers to impose taxes without Congress? The stakes were high, as the outcome would not only affect trade policy, but also clarify the limits of executive authority in times of crisis. The answer would define the limits of executive power in the modern era, shaping the relationship between the branches of government and influencing how future presidents might respond to economic and national security challenges. At the center stood President Trump, whose America First agenda relied on tariffs as a tool for economic leverage. Congress, alarmed by the erosion of its authority, argued that letting a president declare emergencies to impose taxes would set a dangerous precedent. Businesses, from farmers to manufacturers, became the face of the economic fallout, fueling the legal battle. The Supreme Court, with justices from across the ideological spectrum, was tasked with resolving this clash of powers. Their decision would hinge on the major questions doctrine. On issues of vast significance, only Congress can grant such sweeping authority. The stage was set for a ruling that would reaffirm the Constitution's checks and balances. The IEEPA, passed in 1977, was designed to let presidents respond to extraordinary threats from abroad, typically by freezing assets or sanctioning hostile regimes. The Trump administration's use of IEEPA to impose broad tariffs was unprecedented. The White House argued that regulating trade during emergencies included setting tariffs, calling them regulatory fees, not taxes. Opponents insisted tariffs are taxes, and only Congress can levy them. The legal fight centered on whether regulate could be stretched to mean tax, and whether Congress ever intended to hand the president such sweeping power. The major questions doctrine became the challengers' rallying cry: only Congress can authorize actions of such economic magnitude. The Supreme Court would decide if the executive had crossed a constitutional line. The Supreme Court's opinion, delivered by Chief Justice Roberts, was clear and forceful. The justices unanimously agreed that imposing tariffs on such a sweeping scale is not just an executive action. It is, in fact, a form of taxation, and the Constitution is explicit. The power to tax belongs to Congress, not the President. This decision was not just a technicality or a minor clarification. It was a resounding affirmation of the fundamental principle that the branches of government have distinct and separate powers, and that those boundaries must be respected, especially when it comes to something as consequential as taxation. The court firmly rejected the argument that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, gave the president a blank check. While the law's language is broad, the justices found that it does not allow the president to sidestep Congress and unilaterally create a new tax regime by executive order. The court emphasized that even in times of crisis, the president's powers are not unlimited. The justices were careful to draw a distinction between targeted sanctions, which are permissible, and sweeping economic measures that fundamentally alter the nation's tax structure. The justices drew a bright and unmistakable line. While targeted sanctions against specific entities or individuals are legitimate tools of foreign policy, broad tariffs that impact entire industries or the national economy require explicit approval from Congress. This distinction, they explain, is essential to maintaining the balance of power and ensuring that no single branch can unilaterally reshape the nation's economic landscape. Chief Justice Roberts captured the court's reasoning with a memorable phrase: "To read a law passed in 1977 as granting the executive the unilateral power to impose billions in taxes would be to find an elephant in a mouse hole." In other words, if Congress had intended to give the president such sweeping authority, it would have said so clearly and directly, not hidden it in vague or ambiguous language. All 9 justices stood together in agreement, underscoring the importance of the separation of powers as a vital safeguard for liberty. Their unanimous decision sent a powerful message. The Constitution's checks and balances are not optional, and they must be honored, especially when fundamental rights and responsibilities are at stake. The ruling was not about the wisdom or effectiveness of economic policy, nor was it a judgment on the merits of tariffs themselves. Instead, it was a clear statement about who, under the Constitution, holds the power to tax the American people. That authority, the court said, rests with Congress alone. The message from the court was unmistakable. In matters of great national importance, especially those that affect the economy and the lives of millions, the president must work with Congress, not around it. This decision reaffirms the enduring strength of the Constitution and the careful balance of power it creates. The decision immediately recalibrates the balance of power, halting the trend of expanding executive authority. Congress now reclaims its constitutional role over trade and taxation, forcing presidents to negotiate rather than act unilaterally. Lawmakers are likely to be more assertive in guarding their powers, and future legislation may be less willing to grant vague authority to the executive. For the administration, it's a major setback. Tariff strategies must now go through Congress. The ruling also signals that sweeping uses of emergency powers will face tough judicial scrutiny. The court's unanimity offers a rare moment of institutional strength, reminding the nation that constitutional principles can transcend politics. Power shifts back to Congress, restoring the deliberative process at the heart of American democracy. The recent court ruling voids tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, marking a significant shift in U.S. trade policy. This decision not only changes the legal landscape but also has far-reaching consequences for businesses, workers, and consumers across the country. By lifting these tariffs, the ruling removes a major financial burden from American companies that depend on imported materials and products to keep their operations running smoothly. For many businesses, especially those in manufacturing and retail, this means a chance to recover from years of higher costs and uncertainty. Manufacturers can expect lower costs for raw materials and components, which could help them expand production, invest in new technology, and even create more jobs. The ripple effect of these savings may be felt throughout the supply chain. Over time, these cost reductions may eventually translate into lower prices for consumers at the checkout counter, making everyday goods more affordable for families across America. The decision also brings a new sense of stability to global trade, signaling to international partners that the U.S. is committed to predictable and transparent economic policies. It reassures both American businesses and foreign allies that future trade policy will be shaped through Congress, rather than sudden executive action, encouraging long-term planning and investment. However, not everyone will benefit equally. Some industries that previously enjoyed protection from foreign competition due to tariffs will now face renewed challenges, as imported goods become more competitive in the U.S. market. Still, the broader economy stands to gain from lower costs, increased efficiency, and the potential for reduced inflation, which has been a concern for many households. The impact will reach deep into American households, with prices on big-ticket items like cars and electronics, as well as everyday essentials, likely to stabilize or even fall. As competition increases and supply chains adjust, consumers could see more choices and better deals on a wide range of products. Ultimately, the ruling trades targeted protection for a select few industries for broader economic benefits that touch millions of Americans, from business owners to everyday shoppers. As the effects ripple through the economy, more people may find their dollars stretching further, and businesses may discover new opportunities for growth. The full impact of this landmark decision will unfold gradually, shaping the American economy in the months and years to come. Legal experts across the spectrum call this a landmark for the separation of powers. Constitutional scholars say the court has restored a clear boundary. The power to tax remains with Congress, not the president. Trade policy analysts note the decision brings predictability to global commerce, strengthening America's negotiating hand. Some worry the ruling could slow presidential responses to genuine crises, but most agree it's a necessary check on executive overreach. The court's message is clear. National emergency is not a magic wand for presidential power. For fundamental powers like taxation, the Constitution demands a conversation, not a command. The ruling's unanimity signals a deep, cross-ideological commitment to preserving the constitutional structure. The Supreme Court's unanimous decision is a powerful reaffirmation of American democracy's core principles. By drawing a clear line against unilateral executive taxation, the court shifts power back to Congress and the people. The Trump administration must now seek congressional approval for its trade agenda, while businesses and consumers anticipate relief from tariffs. Politically, the ruling challenges the idea that executive action can shortcut legislative debate. The decision is a call for renewed engagement with the constitutional process, even when it's inconvenient. The court has fulfilled its duty as guardian of the Constitution. Now the nation must live up to its principles. The path forward demands a recommitment to the deliberative, sometimes difficult work of democracy.